This is on the leadership component, project management. This overlaps slightly with the course we teach on leadership development, but not everybody takes both classes, so I need to follow the author's guidance here and cover these topics. These are the components of the chapter that we'll just look at one at a time. So this is the overview of this chapter. Now, one of the important parts of leadership, and this applies in general and also to, of course, to project management leadership, is knowledge of self. When you understand yourself better, you're more effective as a leader. That's been demonstrated many times. Questionnaires and approaches like Myers-Briggs also help you understand characteristics of stakeholders, which may be quite different than yours. When you understand someone else's perspective on their project work, life in general, you can more effectively function as in a leadership role. So there's two things to get out of this. And this is a very light coverage of Myers-Briggs, but Myers-Briggs, the questionnaire, attempts to identify personality types, and that's an introspective understanding that it brings to the table. There's four major points. Like I say, there's more to this, and you can read it. You can get more from Marcinio Perry in the dean's office. You can take the test for free with them. But here are just those four major areas, four principal questions of Myers-Briggs. First is, are you outwardly or inwardly focused? It's extroverted or introverted. And these are characteristics, and the questions in the Myers-Briggs tend to bring this out. This would be like talkative, outgoing, or reserved, private. And you can probably think about both yourself and others that you know and characterize them in one or the other area. That's basic focus. This is, how do you take in and receive information? Not just in an academic setting, but in general, in the work environment, the project management environment. This is like focus on the reality of how things are, or imagine the possibilities of how things could be. That's a different perspective. Myers-Briggs calls that sensing versus intuition. How do you prefer to make decisions? The decision process with people, I've seen this over time in many cases, and I believe Myers-Briggs accurately characterizes this, frankly. And now, many times it's not just one or the other. People are have a blend, but one would be this characteristic here. Decisions on impersonal tend to be impersonal, very logical reasoning. This is the way it is, and that's it. This over here would be more sensitivity to how the action affects others and more personal value insertion into it. And then the fourth and last area I'm going to talk about here is how do you live outer life, this structured way here or more open-ended. And you can see the differences here. It's really not possible to get a Myers-Briggs perspective just looking at these. These are more like summary of the notions of Myers-Briggs. And I encourage you to take the test if you get a chance. Some of you have already taken it probably. And because, and I'll end with this point, having this perspective on it helps you grow as a leader. And the self-knowledge is a strengthening point. Okay, that's how it fits together. These are related to what I was talking about, determining best practices and continuing to advance yourself as you do this and becoming agile. That means, in other words, as you learn and adapt, it's a continuous improvement essentially applied to yourself. And that's I think, good view of how you can utilize these things. Dean Perry has told me that you can take Myers-Briggs at no cost. So I hope that's still the case. So if you have interest, I would, if you know Arsenio's a good person and would very much, if you're interested, be happy, I believe, to help with that. Okay, so remember that checklist we had in the beginning. This is another category, creating consistency in working relationships. Okay, and the goal here is to have characteristic here that successful leaders state that you need to engender trust and respect and even admiration. And constituents do not necessarily expect perfection, but most require consistency. If the leader is bouncing around, jumping, it's much more difficult in the working relationship. I think if you think back, you may not have always had the greatest happy for a given leader happiness, but maybe some tough decisions were being made, but at least they were consistent. That's what this talks about. Now, the leadership styles, there's three that we're going to look at here. One is directive. When we looked at forming, storming, norming, and performing, we talked about these a little bit too. This directive is often needed in the beginning of project work. It's not exactly micromanaging, but it's staying rather directly engaged. As was talked about, even when you're looking at different types of things to be investigated, like the batteries. And then there's delegative. This is more hands-off. This happens when things are running smoothly. There's people that I've worked with currently at the center. I don't need to be very much involved after the basic structure of the project is set with it. They'll come to me with problems, but basically the essence of the work and the project leadership is delegated. You should just be aware of these different styles and make them fit the situation, which is what leads me to this. The situational leadership style, to give it a name, is that there's no single best way, which is sort of what we're just talking about. It varies with the circumstance, the task, the job function needs to be accomplished. In the situation I talked about, where it's an experienced person that understands, has done similar project work, that can be, delegative. If it's a project where we haven't done much of it and we're using a lot of new players, then the leadership style needs to have more directive components to it. You need to be closer in, more micro management. Now, risk taking, there has to be some balance of risk taking. I believe in working in many technical environments. There's almost a little bit of risk in everything that you're doing. It's how do you define the level of risk that's acceptable for the person to take that you're leading. You want to encourage it within bounds. And they could be monetary bounds or technical risk. You can't reasonably eliminate all risk, so you need to manage it. And that's what this is talking about. Mistakes can present opportunities, and not as an excuse. Well, that was a great opportunity, I scooped that up, but it's a positive way to set a tone, like I say here, a positive tone in the team environment. Mistakes will happen. We need to learn from them. This is what I tell people. We need to learn from them. Let's not do it again. And let's make the best of this and go forward, as opposed to having a lot of negative reaction to people. Okay, establishing a positive culture of dissent. Now, I probably have this pretty well established with people that I work closely with, but I think it's good. You have to be ready for this, though, because if you encourage people to speak their mind, it's not always going to be, happy days. I think that's healthy. It's a healthy environment. Surrounding yourself with yes people that are afraid to voice views on things, it's really very unhealthy, I believe, because you need to hear those views. They help in decision making, and that type of environment is good, I believe. That's my view on it. It's just you have to be ready for it. Now, when people ask for your opinion in this setting, okay, like not in full agreement with the way somebody's presented a possible plan for something, I think you can do it in a way that is not negative sounding. Like, for example, do you think we should give more consideration to? Or I've reviewed some of this, and another path that people sometimes take is this: maybe we should consider a little bit in our decision-making process and our planning going forward. Just, I don't mean to artificially make it too soft, but as opposed to saying, like, what were you thinking here? Like, it doesn't have to come across as dramatically negative. No reason to do that, in my opinion. These are my opinions on this. You have to form your own comfort level and how what fits your personality. But I think it's good to share different thoughts as you're evolving your own style. So I'm trying to do that. Motivation and leadership. Now, some points here that are made. This is in leadership and project management books, it's management by walking around. Doesn't necessarily mean physically walking around, but it means becoming engaged in as a project manager in the work. Not in other words, if you want to have a physical model of this, it's not the project leader that sits in an office off to the side and never comes out. In certain stages of my working life, I really needed to practice this because with software development, you can go down the wrong path rapidly and chew up a lot of time. When managed by walking around, let you touch base with your developers, see where they're having problems, apply more resources if you need it. Just help people succeed, helping people succeed, not bugging them, helping them succeed. Like I say, that's my best examples would be from development teams and software projects. But this can be done to some extent with the digital technology, but its grounding was from Hewlett-Packard, the technical company. Now, acknowledge accomplishments, big or small, and these should be done in a controlled environment. So the celebration, I mentioned this a little bit before, I think, is celebrations can go, I'm trying to figure the best words, and I should have thought this through a little more. Sometimes celebrations are done at a pub after work, where there's alcohol involved and so forth. And if you're going to take that route and you're running the celebration show, like we finished a project, let's head down to the watering hole or down to I guess, what's the current watering hole? Is it like Molly's? Oh, well, I guess it's nothing now. At any rate, in a non-COVID environment, you would have to make sure that when you're doing the celebration, that it's controlled in this sense. Rather than I'm just going to give you my opinion because I've seen these things go haywire, especially if younger people are responsible for them. And rather than have something that goes with an unended time, like later into the evening, if you have let's celebrate with a dinner and you get room rented and so forth from a certain time period, maybe from dinner time till 9 or 10, that's it. It's clipped at the end. And then there's some, alcohol served with dinner, refreshment and so forth. That's the custom. That's okay with your company, with the business. What I have seen going, and I just want to tell you this, I don't want this to get you caught up in it, is something that goes on till closing time of the pub, like 2 a.m., is likely to have some people that are not necessarily handling that all that well, that are older than you are. It's awkward. So just plan ahead, like the way I said, that it's a controlled environment. Those are the code words for that. Again, I don't want to belabor this, but I just have seen some negatives in the past that along. Now, identify team member roles clearly, observe the dynamics of the group and identify areas where conflicts can occur and plan to have people working in areas that their strengths are in and try to make sure that there's synergies. A couple examples students talked about here were from that. That's part of the figuring out the roles and how the best functioning areas are. Then this is almost the last slide here. Addressing conflicts. These are bound to happen. Well, I won't say bound to happen, but happens. Is how to address conflicts and plan ahead in your mind how you're going to do this. And 2 examples would be to move toward compromising. Nobody's going to win completely here. You can explain that to people. We're looking for a compromise. Okay. And if we can put together a good compromise solution here, people will feel good about getting part of what they were looking for. And the project's going to move forward also because a good solid compromise is made in the thinking. Or collaborating. In collaborating, you're looking to have a synergy where there's a win-win situation. Let's take this resource, and get them connected so that it's a win-win. Project status meetings. These are some guidelines for this. A couple slides here. It's important to status the work. It's particularly in-person meetings. Sometimes meetings, more than you probably would think, don't status the work. They also drift into accomplishing work. It turns the meeting, what's supposed to be status meeting, into a dual purpose. We're trying to move work forward. You need to separate the two. It slows down the status meeting content. Establish ground rules. How many people should be there? Reinforce the fact that this is like an open exchange, so titles aren't that important. The confidentiality, you want to establish that. That's only fair to your client, and in general, it's good practice. And then general courtesies like start and stop times and persons like that. These are the last points here, and then we'll stop. To keep on schedule and on time, sometimes on the list of the agenda items, I'll even put or ask people to put, if I'm not running it, to say as a thought, is to put like this discussion 5 to 7 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes, 5 minutes. You can just put a guideline. It's not hard and fast, but it lets people have a notion of what it would take to have the meeting end on time and the allocation to different areas. If you don't try to do this and have somebody other than yourself, if you're running the meeting, nudge it along, it'll tend to go further over time by too much time often spent in the earlier points. Okay, this can be someone that just assists in this process so you can keep your focus on the main meeting. You need to have somebody other than yourself, and you can do this simultaneously with the occurrence of the meeting. Sometimes, especially, the characteristics of the people on the team. Some people are very hesitant to speak out in a meeting, and you need to gently ask them, like, Bob, did you have any thoughts on this? Not forcing them, but that'll sometimes nudge it. And sometimes the folks that are shy like that have some of the greatest ideas. They just are shy about entering. And that's just try to get every voice heard. And people appreciate that because that little nudge is good. Don't have sidebar extension. This is discussions. This is in-person meetings where people start chatting off to the side. You can say, one of the things I want to do here is to have the meeting end on time. So just if we can focus our discussions on the topic areas on the agenda, that'll be helpful. Just something polite like that. Then ensure that all devices are off. You know that.